2 weeks ago, in episode 562, we spoke about sight, one of our 5 senses. Today, we continue on our theme of senses, and you'll learn vocabulary, expressions, and idioms connected to the sense of sound. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hi, my name's Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with more than 60 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. So, Craig, how are you doing?
I'm not too bad, although you might notice a scratchy throat. We had that expression scratchy throat a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, when we spoke about health and going to the doctor. Bit of a cough, nothing serious, but I do apologise if I don't have my normal voice this week. So I think Reza's going to be doing a lot more of the talking. How are you doing?
I'm fine. But I'm sorry to hear you're a little hoarse. What do I mean by that?
I'm a donkey. I'm a little horse, not the animal, but horse is where it's difficult for you to speak. Your voice sounds scratchy and not normal, so it's below par, below average. You can probably hear it.
Yeah, don't worry, Craig has not become an animal. But what animal would you become if you could be one?
What animal would I become if I could be an animal? I think we would probably agree on this because we've asked this question before of each other. Elephant.
Yes, and we agreed, didn't we?
Nobody messes with an elephant.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Or maybe a bird, maybe an eagle.
Yeah, nobody messes with them either.
Anyway, we're not talking animals this week. We're talking sound, one of the 5 senses. And many thanks to friend of the show, Carmen, for her suggestion of the 5 senses. Let's remind people what they are, Reza. What are the 5 senses?
Number 1, which we've already talked about, is sight. That's spelled S-I-G-H-T. The second one is what we're talking about right now, sound. And we've also got touch. Yeah, when you use your fingers to have contact with something, that's touch. Taste, food taste, and smell, what goes up your nose. Those are the 5 senses.
So let's start with sound and look at 2 verbs that you probably know, hear and listen. But do you know the difference? What's the difference between hear and listen?
Well, for me, hear is not planned, would be my simplest way of explaining it, whereas listen is with intention. Maybe not planned, but with intention would be better. Yeah. Scrap my first definition. I'm going to go for a second one. So hear is without intention. Yeah. And listen with intention. So imagine I'm sitting down and I start to hear some very strange noises. And I think, what's that? I'm going to listen because I'm not sure what that noise is. It's very strange. I've never heard that noise before. So now I'm listening to the noise because I want to know what it is. So with intention. Whereas here would be I'm having dinner and suddenly, boom, I hear a bomb explode. And I say to the person eating with me, did you hear that? So obviously there was no intention when that sound went off. Would you say that's it? A question of intention or not?
Yes, no, that's a very good description, a very good way of explaining it. You could also compare passive and active. You could say that here is something passive, that you're not actively trying to listen. And when you are trying to listen, that's the active way of using the sense. Notice how Reza used the preposition to, which some of you forget when you send us messages and you say, I've been listen to. Remember that preposition that you must put after listen, listening to a podcast.
And I would just add something else about listening here. It's really illogical, I know, but you can use hear as if it had the same meaning as listen with intention, but only for the past. Let me explain. So obviously, if you put on the news on TV or radio and you listen to it, that's with intention. Yeah. I could talk about that to someone the following day. I could say, have you heard the news? I was listening to the radio and have you heard? But hold on, have you heard the news? Well, I'm talking about with intention. Yes, when it's referring to the past, you can use here. You could say, have you heard the news? And obviously you listened with intention, but not when it's present. It's strange, isn't it? You can't say,
interesting. Yeah.
You can't say, I'm hearing the news. You can't say that. I'm listening to the news. But you can say, yesterday, did you hear the news? When it's past, you can use here for the meaning of with intention. Isn't that? Would you agree with that?
That's interesting. I never thought about that before. I never realized it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I heard what you said.
Yeah, exactly right.
There you go. Now, something you might hear while we are recording this podcast is some noise, because we are recording this podcast in a flat in Valencia. We have neighbors. I have neighbors above, below, and both sides of the flat where we're recording. And sometimes you hear a noise. A noise is an uncontrolled sound. In this case, it's the neighbors cleaning and moving their furniture. So it's usually with a negative meaning or a negative connotation. Oh, the neighbors are making a lot of noise. They're being very noisy. So noisy is the adjective. Reza, do you think some cultures are noisier than others?
I do, yes. Yeah. So some cultures, in my experience, are very quiet. That's the opposite of noisy. That's spelled Q-U-I-E-T, quiet. Don't confuse it with the word quite, meaning more or less like it's quite good. This is quiet. That's making a little noise. For example, I've been in Finland. They were very quiet.
The Finns are very quiet, aren't they?
They didn't make much noise. And let's be honest, Valencians are not the quietest of people on the whole.
Scandinavians tend to be quieter than the Mediterranean countries, Greece, Spain, Italy, don't they? If you go up to Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, they tend to be quieter. When we're talking about sound, we can use the adjectives loud and soft. If you imagine the volume changing, if the volume goes up, the sound gets louder. And if the volume goes down, it's softer. So now my voice is really soft. And now it's a bit louder. Loud and soft.
Craig, you know I'm into classical music. I like classical music. Do you know how they refer to whether you should be loud or soft in classical music?
No, I don't.
Well, Italian is the international language of classical music. Classical music, not necessarily rock music. And the word for loud is forte, a bit like Spanish. But the surprising bit for you might be the word for soft is piano.
Oh, I've heard that, yes. Piano.
So you'll often hear Italians say piano, piano, and they're saying, be quiet, don't make a noise, piano, piano. That's why the instrument is called pianoforte. The full name of a piano is pianoforte, but we've contracted it to I play the piano, but it's the pianoforte, the soft loud, an instrument which can be both soft and loud. It was like a great invention at the time. Wow, this instrument can be soft and loud? That's amazing. So they called it the soft loud.
I did not know that. Interesting. So I've learned something as well this podcast. If we speak about sound, we can use the word auditory. You might notice in that word auditory, you might notice the word audio. So auditory is anything related to the sense of hearing. And also notice the pronunciation of audio. Say it with us. Audio.
Greg, can you hear me?
I'm going a bit deaf, Reza. You'll have to speak up.
Oh, sorry.
My ears are not the same as they used to be.
Yeah. Greg is going deaf. He's a bit hard of hearing. He's going deaf. So deaf means that you can't hear. Although, Craig, how would you describe this strange collocation, a deafening noise?
It's a noise that almost makes you deaf. It's so loud, or forte, as the Italians might say, that it almost makes you go deaf. So the verb is to deafen, D-E-A-F-E-N. And if the noise is deafening, then it goes into your ear and it's really uncomfortable and you almost lose your sense of hearing.
Now, Craig, a thing my mum above all used to say to me when I was a young man, and young man's the best word here, she would say, I'm not sure I like the tone of your voice. Did you ever get that from your mum?
Oh, yes. I don't like the tone of your voice, young man.
Young man. If they say young man, you know you're in trouble. You don't get called young man for anything good.
So what exactly is the tone?
So the tone is the quality or the character of a sound, such as it could be high or low, or certain intonation patterns which are used, or just the general overall quality. And everybody knows that the voice can give a lot of meaning to things. So if you speak in a way which your parents or older people consider disrespectful, they will say that they don't like the tone of your voice. In music, they call it timbre, or you could pronounce it timbre. We've taken it from French, but basically that's just the technical word for tone.
So there are different timbres or timbres or tones, aren't there? What are they? Because you studied music, so you probably know this inside out.
We could talk about harsh tones, but that's not just for music. Someone could have a harsh voice. You know, like I think of a sergeant in the army whose job is to always be shouting at the soldiers saying, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you're too slow.
So is harsh shouting then?
Harsh is shouting and just aggressive sounding and not very nice to listen to. That would be a harsh sound. Soft, we already mentioned. Soft can be the volume is low, but it can also be the quality. Let's see if I can do it. Let's see if I can just soften my voice. Is that a little bit better? I know I don't have a very nice voice, but if I soften it a little bit, it sounds a bit better.
Yeah, it sounds lovely.
Tinny. So think of the word tin. If you hit a tin with your hand, it makes a noise, right? That noise is a tinny sound. So sometimes we describe sounds in general as tinny, or even music of a certain type could be tinny.
It would be like a sound without much bass, wouldn't it? So if you bought a really cheap pair of earphones and you tried to listen to music, it doesn't have bass, so it sounds tinny, it sounds cheap almost.
Yeah, it's almost as if you can hear the metal components of the electronic device more than the music. You hear the tin kind of thing. Craig, how would you describe brassy? Brass is also connected to metal.
Well, would it be something to do with the instruments? For example, trumpet, trombone, those instruments that are made out of brass? Is that what it means in music?
For me, that's what it is. So, for example, obviously in jazz and some funky music from like the 60s, 70s, 80s, there's a lot of trumpets. It'll sound brassy. You'll get a lot of trumpet, trombone, that kind of sound. And it's sounds of metal because it's wind passing through metal.
Right. And then there's a rounded kind of sound, which I suppose is a balanced sound where you have got some high noises and some low noises, some bass. So it's mixed quite well and it sounds very, very nice because it's rounded. You've got the range of different timbres or tones.
Yeah. Resonant is a useful word, not just for music, but for sounds in general. If something is resonant, it vibrates a lot. It has a kind of depth to it, a profundity. It vibrates. It's resonant. And quite often we use it metaphorically. For example, they might talk about the politician is very important because very important and very popular because his ideas resonate with the people. It's like they're on the same wavelength. The vibrations are the same. They're hearing what they want to hear. His message resonates. So if something resonates, it vibrates in a nice way, let's say.
A sound can also be mellow, which might be the opposite of harsh. Would you agree with that? It's very soft. It's very pleasant to the ear. It's very nice to listen to. A mellow sound. Very soft.
In music, I'm thinking above all of things like Brazilian bossa nova, which I love. Very mellow, all those songs like, The Girl from Ipanema, all that. Really mellow music. Chilled, relaxed, nice.
There's also a word in music or in sound called pitch, P-I-T-C-H. You might recognize that word from sport, from a football pitch, for example. But in sound, it's talking about how high or how low a sound is, depending on the frequency, or a word that Reza used before, the wavelength of the sound. So you can really go high with your pitch, and I can't do it because my throat's really bad, or you can go down low. So that's a low-pitched sound. And playing with your voice like that can make your communication really effective in English, because some native speakers of, let's say, Spanish, for example, they don't have a very wide range of pitch, and they tend to speak like this where the pitch doesn't vary all the time, which is fine if you're speaking Spanish, but not if you're speaking English, because you need that intonation and you need those changes in pitch to make your communication more effective.
Yes, we really exaggerate in English, don't we, compared to some other languages? We like it. Like if Craig said to me, Reza, I've never told you this before, but I fooled you. I've always been a woman pretending to be a man. I would say, my answer would be like this: really?
You must be joking.
I would go right up from the bottom to the top. My pitch would vary a lot.
Yes.
I wouldn't just say, really? Like I'm not interested or surprised. I am expected in English to really exaggerate the change of pitch.
Yeah, you probably would if I said that to you. Now, obviously, as a musician, Reza, you know the difference between being in tune and out of tune. The tune is the melody of the music, the way the notes come together to create something pleasant. But what does it mean if something or somebody is in tune or out of tune?
Well, you're talking about me here being out of tune. Although I do know the difference, I'm incapable of being in tune when I play the violin. I play the violin a little bit, listeners, and very often I'm out of tune because the violin is an instrument which doesn't automatically stay in tune. It depends where you put your fingers on the neck of the violin. And if you put them in the wrong place, you'll be out of tune. It's not like the guitar. If the guitar is correctly tuned, to tune is to make sure that an instrument is in tune. If the guitar is correctly tuned and you put your finger vaguely in the right place, the note will be fine because you have frets, those lines. Yeah, so you've got quite a lot of flexibility in a guitar. In a violin, it's pinpoint accuracy because there are no frets. So if your finger is literally more than about a millimeter out of place, then you're out of tune. It's tricky.
That's difficult to play the violin then.
In that sense, it is, yeah. And of course, the voice can easily go out of tune because that's up to you to get exactly the right vibration in your vocal cords. Not easy.
And if you want to know what somebody singing out of tune sounds like, just go back to listen to some previous episodes where I was trying to sing. Let's take a quick break here because I know you listen to this podcast to take your English to the next level. But what about your speaking? Is your fluency improving? Are you happy with your speaking skills? My conversation course focuses on making you a more confident and more fluent English speaker. You'll join me and a small group of motivated students, and we'll meet on Zoom and have topical discussions, role plays, debates, and presentations that will expand your vocabulary and help you express yourself effectively in English. So be proactive and take the first step towards becoming a confident and fluent English speaker. Send me an email today to craig@inglespodcast.com and I'll send you details of the next online conversation course. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the podcast. So let's move on now to talk about some common sounds, because English is full of different words and vocabulary to describe different sounds. So what words do we have on the list, Reza?
We've got quite a selection, but we haven't got all the words because we would be here forever. And some words are not that common, so we've picked what we think are the most common and most useful for you. But as Craig said, English is one of the best languages of all languages to describe sound. It's really very, very sophisticated.
It's very rich, isn't it?
Let's start off with crash. Now, a lot of you probably know that as a verb or a noun to describe when, for example, two cars hit each other. There's been a crash. Okay. Think about it. When they crash, there's going to be a noise. So it's the sound of two hard objects, like two cars, for example, hitting each other. So something made out of metal or some really, really hard, durable material. When those two objects or surfaces come together, that's a crash.
And a similar word is smash with an S, S-M-A-S-H. And that's also something breaking, but breaking into small pieces, especially glass. For example, if you drop a glass on the floor, it will probably smash into small pieces. So to smash is the sound of something breaking.
Bang, B-A-N-G, is our next word. By the way, nearly all of these words can be verbs or nouns. Yeah, to crash, to smash, to bang, a crash, a smash, a bang, etc. And bang is a similar sound to crash, but it's more explosive. So we quite often talk about bangers in Valencia. If you ever come to Valencia, you'll need to know about bangers, petardos in Spanish. Those things which during the Fallas festival here, people like to light and leave them and they explode. Or maybe they'll throw them against the ground and they'll explode that way. They're bangers. They bang. They make an explosive crashing sound.
Another word is thud, T-H-U-D, which is also the sound of something dropping or hitting a surface, but it's a very dull, heavy sound. Imagine you drop maybe a heavy cushion or a pillow or even a mattress from a height. When it hits the floor, it will thump. You'll hear a thud when a large, flat object falls to the ground. By the way, if you want to see all of this vocabulary listed for you in the same place, go to inglespodcast.com/565.
Nearly all the words we're going to mention today, by the way, of describing common sounds are onomatopoeic. That means they more or less sound like spoken, like the thing they represent. Think about it. Crash, ksh, smash, psh. Think of the sh sound, the glass breaking all over the place. Bang, thud. And the next one, boom. Sounds a bit like a bomb going off. Exactly. Nearly all of them pretty much imitate the sound that they're making. So B-O-M, boom, is the sound of a distant bomb, for example.
Another sound you might hear, especially if you're opening an old wooden door, you might hear a creak. C-R-E-A-K, that's the dry sound of friction. And when furniture gets old, if you open a door or a window, it might creak. The adjective is creaky, so you might have a creaky door in your flat. And when you get to my age, your joints, your knees, your ankles, you can say that they're also creaky because it's kind of losing all the lubrication when you move them and you stand out and they crack and you hear the creaking of your bones.
You're lucky. You say when you get to my age, I've had creaky joints since I was about 15 because I'm not Benjamin Button. It's not that. It's that I have arthritis. And arthritis gives you creaky joints. So your joints are your articulations. So I know a lot about creaky joints. And mine creak so much that you really can hear them. I've been listening to my joints since I was about 16. I move my shoulder in a certain way and it goes. I hear it creak. So imagine what I'm going to be like if I ever get to about 70. I'll sound like some kind of medieval door opening and closing all day. Can you imagine it?
The sound of a lion is a roar. R-O-A-R. So that's a very full, deep sound that the lion makes. A roaring lion. You can also have a roaring fire if the fire is burning very violently and you're very warm and the wood is burning a lot, then you can say it's a roaring fire. You can also speak about the roar of an engine if you think of a Harley Davidson motorbike or a Ferrari or a Jaguar car or an Aston Martin. When you hit the accelerator, the engine roars. You get this deep, round sound from the engine.
Now, Craig mentioned a roaring fire. Another word often used with fires is crackle. C-R-A-C-K-L-E. That's a rapid succession of short, sharp sounds. So they're sharp, they're high, and they don't last very long. For example, it's the sound of a wood fire, specifically wood, not all fires, but you know how when wood burns, it makes that noise? That is crackle. That sound is crackle. Another thing I always will identify with crackling is when I was a kid, I loved a type of sweet which crackled in your mouth.
Yeah, it was like a sherbet, wasn't it? It exploded in your mouth and crackled, yeah.
Was it called Hundreds and Thousands or something like that?
No, Hundreds and Thousands were the coloured candy pieces, very, very small. I think it was sherbet, wasn't it? Some kind of yellow colour.
But and I know the Spanish have their version, and it's called something like peta pita or pita peta or something like that. You know that thing, you put it in your mouth, kids like it, and it's like little mini explosions going off, or like a piece of burning wood, like crackling in your mouth. It makes a strange noise, which you think is in your head. Yeah, that's a crackling sound as well, isn't it?
Also on old radios, when you were trying to find the station you like to listen to, the radio would crackle until you found the station.
Yeah, imagine we weren't a podcast. Imagine we were on radio again. And it's up and daring Les with and Craig, that kind of sound, yeah?
Yeah, in fact, if you learned English on the radio, you'd be speaking like this because you learned on the BBC. Reza, not counting music, what are your favourite sounds?
Well, it's a sound which I now only have in my dreams, but I remember
sounds
it very
interesting.
well. The sound of Coco, may he rest in peace, who was my dog, snoring beside me.
Ah, your dog Coco, yeah.
I don't like any other snoring in the world, including my own, but it was such a lovely noise just to hear, because he had a very soft snore. And it was just really nice to know that he was there, not in the bed, but on the ground beside me, snoring. I really miss that sound.
Yeah, I can imagine.
What about you?
I like the sound of coffee being made. So when you go into a cafe and you can hear the milk frother when they're heating up the milk, and then they turn on the espresso machine and the coffee comes out. Maybe it's a combination of senses, because I also love the smell and the noise of people speaking in the bar, but that noise of that espresso machine, yeah, I really like that. Moving on, we've got some more words. We just had crackle. Let's go to another one called beep, which is a short, high-pitched sound. So high. I can't do high in my throat. High-pitched sound. Beep, beep, That's beep, it. Thank you. It's often electronic. So maybe if you hear a lorry, a big truck reversing in the street. Beep, 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 beep. Exactly. Beep, beep. It's beeping. And also if you have voicemail, you might say, leave your message after the beep.
The next word is an adjective. So they've all been nouns and verbs up to now. Here's an adjective. A piercing, P-I-E-R-C-I-N-G. A piercing sound is a very high-pitched, sharp sound. And we say piercing because it's so high and so sharp. Sharp is something which cuts, that it seems to go through you. Imagine it like comes in one ear and goes out the other because it's like penetrated your brain. It's like pierced you. So we call it a piercing sound.
You can have a piercing scream, can't you? If someone screams and it like goes through your brain, through your head, it's very unpleasant. A sound that's very common here in Valencia in the summer is the whirring of a fan. WHIRRING. If a fan whirls, it's the sound that it makes as it goes around and it's cutting through the air. So the motor of the fan is turning it and you're hearing this whirring sound.
Also, watch basically any film ever about the Vietnam War, any American film, the bit where the helicopter arrives.
The whirring of the helicopter blades. Yeah.
There's always a slow motion of the helicopter coming down. Always the slow-mo. You hear that. You hear the helicopter blades going around. Whirring.
Also in the summer, you might hear the buzzing of a bee. Buzz, buzz, buzz. And that word buzz, you can also use for your intercom or your doorbell. Reza arrived at the flat and he rang the bell this morning. And I said, I'll buzz you up, which means I will press the intercom so that the door opens below and you can come in. So you can buzz someone in or buzz someone up if you live up on the 4th or 5th floor, for example.
Now, all of you will be familiar with the word click. You know that you click on things on a computer. But a clicking sound, well, it could be the sound of a computer mouse button, or it could be this. You hear that? That is Craig clicking his pen. You know how you have a little thing at the top and you click it and the end of the pen either comes out or retracts back in? That's a clicking sound. So here's another one. I just clicked my fingers.
Don't you get annoyed by students clicking their pens in class? It's annoying, isn't it?
If they do it a lot, it is annoying, yeah.
Another sound you may hear is a rattle. RATTLE. Rattling. What rattles? Well, machines rattle, especially if they're old. Also, a baby can have a rattle, which entertains a small baby, and they shake it, or the parent shakes it, and it makes a noise. So it's rattling. There's also a type of snake called a rattlesnake because it makes a noise in its throat that sounds like a baby's rattle.
Yeah, normally...
Oh, no, hang on a second. It's not the throat, it's the tail, isn't it, that vibrates? Yeah, the rattlesnake has the rattle in the tail.
Normally, most of the time, we don't like rattling sounds. That's why the rattlesnake rattles its tail to irritate you, to warn you that you better go away or it's going to kill you. But there is one rattling sound which I love. I love the rattling sound of taking one of those old trams in Lisbon. That's my favorite rattling sound. Going up a hill at a crazy angle in one of those ancient trams. I love the rattling sound they make going up and down the hills of Lisbon.
Yeah, me too. It's very special. A sound can be muffled, muffled, which makes the sound softer and not so clear.
You can also muffle your voice, can't you?
Well, you're muffling, yes.
Yes, your voice can be muffled. I've got a handkerchief over my mouth, so my voice is kind of muffled at the minute. But I've taken the handkerchief away now.
Yeah, you've muffled your voice.
Craig, I bet it would be really difficult for you to speak in a shrill voice right now because your throat's sore.
I could not do that, so yeah, I'm pleased you did it. That's a shrill sound, a high-pitched and unpleasant sound. Imagine you have to wake up early on Monday morning and the alarm goes off. We don't say the alarm sounds in English, we say it goes off. We use a phrasal verb. When the alarm goes off at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., it's a shrill, unpleasant sound, isn't it? You don't like the sound of that Monday morning alarm. So a shrill, high-pitched sound, usually unpleasant.
Another sound which is nearly always an indication of something bad is a rumbling sound. So a rumble, R-U-M-B-L-E, is a deep, continuous sound, but not very loud, like thunder in the distance. Yeah? Or your stomach rumbles when you're hungry. You know, it kind of actually makes that noise, which is hard to hear, but if you really listen, you can hear it. Do you notice me saying listen and hear in the same sentence there? If you really listen intentionally, then you can hear it. Quite often you'll get them in the same sentence. You can hear the rumbling if you really listen to your stomach sometimes when you're hungry.
If you walk into a cave and you shout or speak loudly, you might hear your voice reflected back to you. And that's called an echo. So you walk in the cave and you say, hello, 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 hello. So the echo comes back, each time softer than the last.
So those are quite a few nouns and verbs and adjectives, individual words describing sound. Let's look at a few idioms. So idioms, just to remind you, are when you have two or more words together, an expression, but the meaning of the words is not their normal meaning. For example, if I said to you, oh, I was a bit worried about my friend Peter, who's visiting a country where there's just been a revolution, but he phoned me, he's safe and sound. I'm not talking about noise. I'm just saying that he's unharmed and well. He's safe and sound. So the word sound there refers to being well, being secure.
Yeah, if you travel somewhere and your family are worried about you, you might send them a message and say, oh, we arrived there safely. We're here safe and sound. You can also give or receive sound advice. If the advice is sound, it's good, it's sensible. For example, you might say to someone, I suggest strongly that you invest in your health. Yes, that's sound advice.
Another use of sound is with asleep. So if you are sound asleep, you are sleeping very deeply. That's really confusing, isn't it? You might think it means you're making a lot of noise, maybe like you're snoring, but it doesn't mean that. It just means that you're sleeping deeply when you're sound asleep.
There are also quite a few expressions connected to your ears that you use to hear with. You can play something by ear, and if you're speaking about music and you play by ear, that doesn't mean you're hitting the piano with your ear. That means you can reproduce music and play music without actually reading the score, the notes. Now, as an idiom, you can use it to describe something you do that doesn't have a clear plan. So if you do something by ear or you play it by ear, you're doing it without any specific intention or plan to do it.
Another common idiom with ear is to turn a deaf ear. That means to deliberately ignore something. So you're not really deaf, but you pretend, you fake that you don't understand or you simply haven't heard it. If you do that, you're turning a deaf ear.
Something my wife often says to me when she tells me some particular piece of advice or what she thinks is sound advice, she says, well, I'm not going to tell you again because it will fall on deaf ears, which means that I pay no attention. So when information is ignored or advice is ignored, you can say that it's fallen on deaf ears. It's not going to be paid attention to.
Now, every time Craig gets in touch to say, hey, would you like to come round and record a podcast? And then afterwards, maybe we'll have a nice meal together. It's music to my ears. It's something that I like to hear, something very pleasant. Music to my ears.
Hey Reza, would you like me to tell you about my experience yesterday that was very interesting?
I'm all ears.
So when Reza said he's all ears, that means he's interested to hear what I have to say. So if you want to demonstrate and show to somebody that you're listening attentively, just say, go ahead, I'm all ears.
Craig, after we finish recording this podcast, can we talk for about 10 minutes? Do you remember I mentioned about you maybe lending me £2,000? Do you mind if I bend your ear after this podcast?
You're going to bend my ear about money. What does that mean, to bend someone's ear?
If you bend someone's ear, it could mean you're physically moving it, but when it's the idiom, it doesn't mean that. It means simply to talk to someone for a while. Often because you've got a request. If you're bending someone's ear, you need to talk to them about something which you think is important, and you're probably going to ask them to do something.
We said before, I'm all ears means that you're listening, you're paying attention. The opposite is when it goes in one ear and out the other, which means you hear something, but you don't necessarily pay attention to it or care about it. For example, I'm always telling my friend he has to do this or she has to do this, but they never listen. They don't listen. It goes in one ear and out the other.
Craig, the other day, a young student in one of my young learner classes, about 12 or 13 years old, was being really, really irritating to me and to everybody. So I gave them an earful.
An earful of what?
Well, just an earful. I didn't put anything in their ear, well, except the sound of my voice, I guess. So an earful is an angry or abusive outburst. I told them to stop being stupid, sit down and do the exercises because they were being very, very disruptive. So I gave them an earful.
When someone or something stops living, you can say that it's dead. It dies, yeah? Dead is the adjective. But you can also use dead, the adjective, to mean completeness. For example, dead silence means complete and total silence. When I walked into the room, I noticed that nobody was speaking, everyone was looking at me, and everyone was dead silent.
So silence, obviously, is when there's no noise. But strangely, we do collocate the adjective deafening with silence. But how can silence deafen you? Do you remember Craig said that to deafen is to make someone deaf so that they can't hear? If a really, really loud noise could deafen you. If you were beside a bomb that exploded, it would be deafening. You wouldn't be able to hear properly for quite a long time afterwards, maybe never again. So a deafening silence seems impossible. We call that an oxymoron because if it's silent, how can it be deafening? But what it means really is that something is very noticeable because there's a complete lack of sound. Or it could be metaphorically of response. So imagine when I said to Craig finally, so Craig, about that £2,000, are you going to lend it to me or not? Nothing.
Deafening silence.
He didn't say a word. So his silence was deafening. There was absolutely no noise, but that made me really, really understand that the answer is no. There was a deafening silence.
A lot of people feel uncomfortable when there's silence, but there is an expression which says that silence is golden, from the word gold. So that's a good thing, right? Gold is nice. It means it's better to say nothing and make no sound. Silence is golden.
It's a classic thing that parents say to kids when they want them to shut up, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And the last one, I think, describes me and Craig pretty well. We are nearly always on the same wavelength. And I'm not talking about radio and stuff to do with podcasts, although physically, yeah. It means to have the same thoughts or opinions as someone. If you're on the same wavelength, you agree with most of what they say, you get what they're saying. If you get someone, you understand them. You're could also say you're in tune with their opinions.
So now it's your turn to practice your English. You've heard lots of vocabulary, lots of expressions and idioms connected to sound in this podcast. So we want to leave you with a question to answer. If a visitor, a foreign visitor, came to your country, what sounds do you think they would notice first? So imagine Reza and I came to visit you. You don't live in Spain, or you do live in Spain. What sounds in your country do you think a foreigner would notice first? That's a way to practice the vocabulary we've introduced in this podcast. And we'd love to get your voice messages and listen to them. Reza, how can people contact us?
Yes, if you want to leave a message using sound, in other words, your voice, you could leave it at SpeakPipe. There's a link in the show notes. It's speakpipe.com/Inglés Although, if you don't want to use sound and you want to use written English, you could send an email to either craig@inglespodcast.com or belfastreza@gmail.com.
We would love to hear from you. And if you're a Spanish speaker and you want to improve your English with free and paid resources, visit the Mansion Inglés website at mansioningles.com. And for paid products, you can browse the online store at store.store.com. www.mansioningles.net.
As always, we'd like to say thank you very much to all our Patreon supporters. And the Patreon program is a way of people saying thank you by donating some money. It doesn't have to be very much, but as a way of saying thank you for your donation, we will give you access to the audio transcriptions. Also, as an extra additional way of saying thank you to your contribution, you will be able to Zoom chat with Craig. If you're interested, have a look at the link in the show notes. It's patreon.com/inglespodcast.
We can't mention and thank all of you here. It would just take too long, but we will mention Edgar Velandia, who has recently increased his support of the podcast. And thank you so much to everybody who is helping us to continue with this podcast and keep it going. We really appreciate you. What's next week, Reza?
Next week, we're going to continue talking about the 5 senses. It will be touch that we talk about.
Okay, so keep in touch, keep listening to us, and thank you for your company this week. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, why not tell a friend so that more people can listen? And the music this week is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.